Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to American Orthodoxy. I'm your host, as always, Benjamin Michael. Got a great show for you today. A couple things that hit very close to home for me. Going to be covering particularly the ethnic cleansing of the German population, particularly civilians after World War II. Going to be going over that. Going to be going over the updates on Iran. There was a couple things this week that we're going to go over, as well as some very exciting upcoming events that are going to be happening involving Father Josiah Trenum and Father Peter Heers. So I'm very excited about that. And then I'm also going to be going over just a brief kind of summary of the Greater Israel agenda. And why I want to go over that is because it's often framed as some sort of conspiracy theory. When in fact it is demonstrable throughout really all of Israel's history and predating it back to the founder of Zionism, Herzl. So as far as the upcoming events I want to talk to you guys about, so there's two different events that are coming up that there will be more information to follow. But it looks like what we're going to be doing is in September, Father Josiah Trenum is trying to put on an event with a bunch of big potential donors, as well as just Protestants that are sympathetic to Orthodoxy. It is an Orthodox event. There's not going to be like speakers that are Protestant like there have been in past events that Father Josiah has done. But this one in particular is going to be really getting like all the Ortho bros in. We're trying to get Jay out there. They want me to speak on nationalism and things of that nature. And so we're trying to get kind of all the big name Orthodox there for that. And that one's going to be, like I said, that one's going to be more open to non-Orthodox. And then come in December, we're looking at putting on an event. Father Peter Heers is looking at putting on an event that's going to be a little bit more exclusive to just Orthodox, and that one is going to be more theologically oriented. So the former in September that we're looking at doing is going to be like a cultural revolution type event. Because as you guys know, Orthodoxy, right, is the answer to our cultural problems, right? And thank you for the super chats. As always, I'll go over those at the end. And thank you guys for all the memberships. I've gotten a lot of new members, and I really appreciate that because that's obviously, regular, monthly income that I can count on. And as you guys know, I'm trying to do this full time, and I try to give you guys exclusive content through my memberships. I try to do members only streams and give you guys that content. So I'll do a members only stream at the end of today. Got some stuff for you for that. And otherwise, like I said, you got these two events coming up. And so I'm very excited about that. I just had a call yesterday with Father Peter and a representative from Patristic Nectar. So it looks like that's going to be a go for both of those. And the other thing too, the guy that I'm working with Patristic Nectar is like extremely based. He's a dear brother who actually worked on the first Trump campaign. Now he's kind of off the Trump train, just like a lot of us are. But he worked on the first Trump campaign. Super based, and Father Josiah, I guess, really trusts his word, and so anyways, it's a great setup because, like I said, he trusts his judgment, and so he's trying to get the Ortho bros out there. Cleve's been doing a lot of good work. He just had a great stream last night, refuting some of the enemies of the Ortho bros, if you will. And then I had this week there was some fireworks this weekend. Actually, like I woke up ready to leave for liturgy, and unfortunately I had to hang on a second. Oh, there it is. Unfortunately I woke up to two different posts of screenshots of my thumbnail from like a month ago. It was one of my first episodes. I'll show you guys what the posts were. So, also, my OBS setup for some reason was being weird today. So you guys let me know if there's anything weird about my studio. Someone was asking about calling in, and I wasn't planning on taking call-ins today. But someone was asking about disagreements on Israel, and so I'll have a conversation about that. That's fine. So thank you for the new membership. Welcome to the Legionaries I told this to my members on my members only stream. I was thinking about changing it to Legionaries, but I feel like that is a I don't know. I feel like it's like disrespectful to Codrianu and Michael the Archangel. And so yeah, buddy. I mean, this dude, you're welcome to have a conversation. You're welcome to call in. I'll take call-ins after I kind of get through my source material. But I do not even like. I mean, I would love to hear what your actual disagreement with any of my positions are. Using the saints to promote white nationalism. I have no idea what you're talking about. Literally don't even know what you could possibly be referencing. I read the saints to make sure that our nationalist movement, which I reject the label of white nationalist because I don't think it's helpful. I call myself an American nationalist, and I believe that ethnicity matters. I believe that American identity matters. So you're welcome to call in, big guy. I highly doubt you will, though. So yeah, and thank you, mods. Mods are doing a good job. Those guys that want to disagree, they're welcome to call in. Okay, so this is what's going on here this week. So this was posted over, I think, like a month ago. Like this was like my third episode, I think. I'm pretty sure it was my third episode. It was right when Saint Seraphim was announced. It was announced that he was going to be getting canonized, and so I had this episode. Now YouTube was not happy with this title, so I changed it to European Identity like immediately, like within a week. I think I changed it to European Identity because my view, and actually, I'm kind of convinced my viewership. If you look at my viewership was significant. Like my first couple episodes, I was killing it. I think my first episode has 8.1K views. And then my third and my, like all the way up till this episode, I had, like almost 6,000 views per stream, which is insane because I barely have 6,000, subscribers. So by the way, please like and subscribe if you're not already part of the channel. So I posted this video, which did very well, by the way, got extremely positive feedback. But it's really interesting to me because, there's nothing about this that would make anyone think that I'm some sort of white supremacist. Yet, that was the reaction I got from some of these people, some boomers, particularly Orthodoxy Above the Clouds. This guy went on like a campaign. I had priests reaching out to me because he's been DMing them and spreading lies about me. Thankfully, these are priests that trust me and know that he's lying about me. But there were priests that literally, this guy was like blowing up their DMs, calling them racist for associating with me. I'm not going to name the priests, but he was reaching out to these priests and saying, if you associate with this guy, I guess I don't really know you. You must be a racist too. So this guy is mentally unstable. I mean, he was posting about like sodomy a couple days ago. It was just bizarre, just some bizarre posts. But anyways, he attacked me literally like 10 hours before liturgy. I woke up to the notifications on my phone because this guy had posted this and people were tagging me and things of that nature. And I usually just check, like I usually don't go on Twitter much before liturgy. But when there's a fire, like I usually get noticed because, I have notifications, right? So I just checked and I saw this. I was like, are you kidding me, dude? I was like, are you freaking kidding me? Literally 10 hours before liturgy, this guy posts this. So when we're supposed to be preparing to go worship the Lord and receive the body and blood of Christ, right? This guy instead is attacking me, calling me I don't want to say it on YouTube, for literally just the phrase, the white race. And people were calling him out in the comments. They were like, dude, like, what is, let me see if I can find, there was a particular, I blocked him because he blocked me. There was a particular comment where a guy was like, didn't even agree with me. Right. So this guy, this dude, I think is a I believe he's African American, and he shares this screenshot of me welcoming him to the Orthodox Church. Because people calling me that. So um, trying to think of where there's just people. He's getting flamed. He's basically just getting flamed throughout the comments for attacking me. Here, yeah, like some just asking like, hey, like what is it that you're actually like, you can just tell, like everyone is attacking him or at least everyone is defending me, right? Um, and I appreciate like people who disagree with me. I appreciate that, like the sentiment is clear, like, hey, if maybe I disagree with Ben, but hey, I can at least understand where he's coming from, and it's wrong to say that he's like racist or something like that, right? There was one where someone just called him absolutely insane for, yeah, like everyone's just telling him to like watch my content. That's basically what everyone is saying. Everyone's like, dude, like you clearly have never seen his content. Um, like he's just getting flamed like in the entire comment section. But anyways, I'll show you guys what I said. So I was like, look, if your immediate reaction to the phrase the white race is to call someone a Nazi, then you need to do some serious reflection on how much propaganda you've ever undergone. And listen, like this is what I encourage people. It's like, look, like, and this is one of the reasons why I chose the thumbnail I did originally, right? Because there's nothing wrong with the phrase the white race. Like it's like if I say black people and you immediately think I'm talking about black supremacy, like everyone would think you're insane, right? If I say the phrase black people, right? But somehow when I say white people, the white race, now I got people that think I'm some sort of white supremacist, right? So this is and you guys have to understand, this is why I do the framing I do. I know we have guys that are further right than me that wish I was a little bit more aggressive with some of this stuff. Look, like this, we have to reach the normies, okay? We have to reach the normies, which means our framing has to be impeccable. Our framing has to be impeccable. Our objective presentations of these issues needs to be impeccable. Like that is why I do the show that I do, and I do it the way I do, right? I know I can kind of gauge, right, where people are at with a lot of these issues, okay? And to be frank, they're at a point where they're not even ready for the phrase the white race. I'm not going to lie. This was like pushing the limit. The phrase the white race. And I showed people how kind of stupid this is by reading St. Nikolai. And again, shout out to the guys over at World War Now, because they're the ones who showed me these quotes here, because this is an untranslated work. But St. Nikolai On War in the Bible on 6 different occasions, and I showed you guys the actual source material on, I think it was the very stream that he's critiquing, which is ironic because if he had actually watched it, right? If he had actually watched it, he would have known, oh, so the saints use this phrase. So if the saints use it, then it's probably not white supremacy, unless you want to call the saints white supremacists, right? Now, there's people who will argue that there's no such thing as the white race. But here's the reality, right? At the very least, there are ethnicities that are white. Okay? Colloquially, there is something known as the white race, and everybody knows what it is. Whenever we're talking about, and I'm going to come back to this, but this is important here. Whenever we're talking about the white race, right? Suddenly people don't know what it is. Right? When we're talking about us going extinct, being exterminated off the face of the earth, suddenly people don't know there's no such thing as the white race. It's one race, the human race. But then when we're talking about past atrocities, right? When we're talking about things that white people supposedly are guilty of in the past, such as colonialism or genocide or whatever the case may be, suddenly everybody knows who's guilty of that. They know what whiteness is all of a sudden. They know who the white people are. They know who belongs to the white race. So people like to play dumb on this. Oh, what even is the white race? they point to maybe exceptions to the rule, right? And I've used the analogy before of the Amazon rainforest, right? Because the Amazon rainforest, although it has a objective location that it exists, there's sort of like transitionary phases. So there's not actually like strict starts and ends to the Amazon rainforest. But to say the Amazon rainforest doesn't exist or doesn't have an objective location is obviously nonsense, right? And so this is why we want to talk with a general language, normative language, when we talk about issues of race and ethnicity, because there's going to be exceptions. And this is why it's frustrating when people like point out exceptions to the obvious rule to try to disprove the rule. That's not how rules work, right? Just because there is an exception doesn't mean that the rule doesn't apply normatively. And that's all we're making. That's the only claim we're making. So anyways, I called him out because clearly he didn't watch the video, because once again, I changed this like a week after I posted it because YouTube flagged me, and that's why my viewership is so down. YouTube flagged me for it. So I had to change it to European identity. And so that means that someone sent him the screenshot. I actually know where he got it. It was another guy called Young Penitent or something, who literally has Chief Piety Signaler in his bio. So he openly admits that he's a piety signaler. That he was the guy who posted it, saying this is a poor representation of Orthodoxy. And then, yeah, like I just called him out. I'm like, look, like this was like right before liturgy, like literally right before liturgy. So anyways, here's St. Nikolai using the phrase, defines it as Europeans and Americans, says these are the people of the white race. So I guess like take it up with him. I mean, if you have a problem with the phrase, and then someone posted today, I appreciate these posts because it shows the double standard. When people like Father Turbo, Father Samuel Davis, and Sig say they want to preserve their stock and reclaim African Christianity, no one bats an eye, and they shouldn't. That's correct. I have supported these individuals, particularly Sig, but I would support anyone that wants to baptize their culture and their people. I would support all that. And in fact, I openly support it. But when Ben Michael says he wants to reclaim European/American identity using Orthodoxy as a catalyst, he's a Nazi. So you guys can see the disparity here in our standards, right? Because when I even like talk about the existence of the white race, I'm literally labeled a white supremacist. Think about how absolutely insane that is. Think about how absolutely insane that is. But there's plenty of people that are not white who do the exact same thing. They speak the exact same way about their ethnicity and about their race, right? And it's not an issue. In fact, it's celebrated. Most people celebrate it. Rightfully so. You should celebrate it. You should celebrate your heritage. Everyone should celebrate the good parts of their heritage and baptize the bad parts. I am not some sort of like white people apologist. I don't think white people are perfect in history. I think there were bad things that we committed. Now, are we disproportionately demonized? Absolutely we are. Absolutely. That's obvious to anyone paying even remotely paying attention, right? So, but I'm not, it's not like exclusionary. Like, and once again, I don't understand why if I'm pro-white, that somehow means like I'm anti-black or I'm anti-Asian. Like, what kind of nonsense is that? What kind of nonsense is that? Okay? So all I'm here to do is point out the double standard, right? The blatant double standard. And I'm just speaking the same way everybody else gets to speak because there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, your heritage is beautiful. It literally doesn't matter where you come from. Your heritage is there's a lot of beauty, even in cultures, right? Even in these cultures that have been subverted by, like paganism or, Hinduism is a form of paganism. Hinduism is disgusting. Islam is disgusting. Judaism is disgusting. But each one of the heritages that usually is associated with those religions, there's Christian aspects of it in history. And when they were Christian, They were beautiful societies. Look at the entire Middle East. We talked about this last week with the debate that Andrew Wilson had with Daniel Hakikachu, right, on this very topic of, look at what the Middle East turned into after Islam took over, right? So Islam takes over the Middle East, and now it's a shithole, right? When it was Christian, it was literally a world power. The Middle East was literally, you had multiple nations that were world powers in North Africa and the Middle East. Study the history of Carthage and Alexandria, right? I mean, Constantinople itself, right? Antioch, right? Jerusalem. I mean, you can study what these were under Christianity, and then Islam came in and turned them into a total shithole. So there's plenty of beautiful heritages, right, that you can celebrate, and you should celebrate, and you should discover that. It doesn't matter if you're white or if you're not white, whatever your race or ethnicity is, you should discover the beauty of the heritage you come from, because God gave it to you. And this is what Codriano talks about. This is one of my favorite quotes by Codriano. Maybe I should pull it up, because one of my favorite quotes by Codriano talks about this. Talks about how the heritage that we've been given is actually something that we are the steward of. The ultimate goal in this life, or the ultimate goal is not life. It is resurrection. The resurrection of nations, plural, in the name of Jesus Christ the Savior. Creation and culture are only means, not the purpose of resurrection. Culture is the fruit of talent, which God implanted in our nation, and for which we are responsible. So what he's saying here, guys, is that your nation that you inherited, that is you are a steward for that, right? So I think he's referencing the parable of the talents, right? And I believe as Westerners, like, we've been given 5 talents. And to be honest with you, we're throwing it away. To be honest with you, we've been throwing it away in recent years, right? And by the way, this is the guy that I'm being attacked for defending. The guy who said that. I'm being attacked for defending this guy. When, by the way, I mean, this thread, you guys can read this thread. It's full of saints who also endorsed him and were even part of his movement, right? I mean, like, this man was a incredible, I believe, saint. I mean, yeah, this was the symbol of their movement was literally based on a common cross that they would find in Romania. But, like, this is another quote. Fascism is preoccupied by clothing, namely the forms of state organization, not sought by the body, namely racial eugenics. Whereas legionarism, that's Codriano's movement, is preoccupied by something much deeper, by the soul, namely by its strengthening through cultivation of Christian values and virtues, and its preparation with final salvation in mind. So his primary focus in both these quotes, you can see, is final salvation. Salvation dealt with by the Christian church in the most perfect fashion, right? So this is the hateful fascist that I'm being accused of defending. He was so hateful, clearly. He really hated a lot of people. That's why the saints really loved him. So, all right. So we got some big stuff coming around the corner, guys. So first of all, it looks like Nick and I are going to be regularly. Oh, someone's asking if I want to go on Tim Pool's show. That would be cool. Nick and I are probably going to be regularly doing that stream that we did on Saturday. So I put it in my description, the video that Nick and I had on Saturday, where it went really well. It's performing very well on his channel. And he He and I were debating Muslims on whether or not Muslims belong in America. So that's probably going to be a regular Saturday stream, I think. We're going to do call-ins and debate with Muslims. I actually had a clip where I debated a Zionist as well. So you guys can go check that out. It's in the description. But the big news that's coming up here is I'm going to be debating Junior, it looks like, on June 30th. So it looks like it's going to be over on God Logic's channel. That's the plan right now, is to debate him on whether Muslims belong in America. So with that being said, I'm pretty excited about that. I'm going to be doing a lot of debates coming up. This is probably going to be the first of many. So yeah, we're going to dive into a couple of the current events going on before we get into our main event. I have a lot of material today. This is probably going to be a little bit of a long stream, so I'm excited for you guys to be here. Welcome, those of you who are new to the channel. This is American Orthodoxy. I'm the host, Benjamin Michael, and we cover all things politics and religion. Yeah, if you're not subscribed, please like and subscribe to the channel and push it out to the algorithm. As I said, you know, I'm shadow banned right now, pretty bad over here. You know what's funny? I'm getting like traction on Facebook of all places. Like my accounts are, ever since I went crazy viral when Massey was lost his primary. I've been like nuked on all my accounts because I went crazy viral that day on like multiple different posts, and I'm getting traction on Facebook of all places now. So that's interesting. Yeah, me and Nick are good friends. In fact, Nick is the only reason I was able to get this stream going. He was very helpful. Okay, so I want to play this clip because a lot of you guys may have seen. So those of you who don't know who Peter Thiel is the founder, basically head of the company Palantir, which is a, you know, how to describe Palantir, a surveillance technology company, I guess. And he and a Jewish individual by the name of Alex Karp basically had that company. And so I wanted to play this video because a lot of you guys know about the AI data centers that are popping up. And look, like these AI data centers, it's very obvious, I think, are probably here for some sort of surveillance state. So I'm probably cooked. So it is what it is. So support me while you can, because I'm probably cooked. But it is what it is. No, I'm just kidding. Kind of kidding. But anyways, so I want to play this clip here. It's a brief clip about Peter Thiel because...
So why has Peter Thiel bought the most expensive house in Buenos Aires? Why is he here? The first possible explanation is that he might just like the area. Palermo Chico is the most exclusive neighborhood in Buenos Aires, and Thiel's massive 17,200 square foot home...
It's ironic that he's ANCAP because of his support of a surveillance state.
...is right here in the middle of it. Now, I'd never usually stand outside of somebody's home and film it, but I didn't feel too bad in this case.
Very true. Very true.
Thiel's affinity for surveillance. He's the co-founder and chairman of the board of Palantir and has a net worth of $30 billion. For him, buying this home is like someone with a net worth of $100,000 buying a home for just $40. Perhaps he just did it because he could, but given the current political situation here in Argentina, this strikes me as unlikely.
So I'm not going to play the whole thing here, but you guys get the point here that so he's basically running away to Argentina. Just bought a massive property over there, and he's not the only one that's leaving. So he brought his entire family over there, enrolled his kids in school over there. But I also want to show you guys old Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner are doing something similar here.
I'm working on an incredible project with my husband in the Mediterranean. It's massive in scale.
I think that's an understatement. Can you explain?
Yes, it is.
There's no power on this island. You're building everything from scratch. Correct.
Well, it's an unbelievable, beautiful 1,400 hectare private island in the middle of the Mediterranean. We were on a friend's boat and we stopped for a swim. Effectively, that's how we found it. We swam to the island. We went on a hike, barefoot all the way up to the top, and we were just captivated. And it stayed with us ever since. And over the course of many years, we developed the opportunity to help realize its potential and transform it, but with a lot of restraint and care, because the land is so beautiful that really the architecture has to be fully integrated into it, almost rise from it. You know, it's not even a business for me, despite the scale of it. We not only the island, but we have 5 miles of beachfront directly across from the island, this beautiful peninsula with a
5
lagoon
miles
on
is
one
crazy,
side, the
bro.
ocean
5
on the
miles is
other,
crazy.
beautiful white sand beaches. For me, it feels more like a challenge than anything else. The culmination of all of my experience in real estate, all of my travel, a lot of reflection on how I want to live, how I think people increasingly are wanting to live, and trying to really build something that's a tangible manifestation of that. That
Welcome
requires
to memberships.
a lot of vision.
Thank you for signing up.
The collaboration of some of the greatest masters that exist. So I was just there walking the land, really just.
Yeah, so I just find it interesting. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the show Paradise, but it's about like the elites, and they're basically the elites like build this massive dome, like preparing for the end of the world. And then once like nuclear warfare pops off, they all go like live there. And thank you for the super chats. I'll go over all of them at the end as always. So it's kind of interesting. Like, sometimes reality is crazier than parody. And I feel like this is one of those cases. I mean, within a couple of weeks, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and then Peter Thiel are like permanently fleeing the United States. So I find that interesting. Like I said, there's a lot going on with these AI data centers. And so we'll kind of see where it goes from there. I got a caller, so I'll see if, I wasn't planning on taking calls today. So let me make sure audio and everything is good. Hello, can you hear me? Hello? There's a lot going on with these AI data centers. Hello? And so we'll kind of see where it goes from there. I got a caller, so I'll see if, I wasn't planning on taking calls today. Yo. Hello? Hello? All right, this guy can't hear me. He's listening to my actual video. I can hear him in the background. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? 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 Can you guys hear him in the background? I can hear him in the background. Hello?
Oh, wait, hold on.
Can you guys hear him?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? Hello? All right. I don't know what's going on.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Hello? Yeah, they can hear you. He just doesn't have his... He literally just doesn't
Hello?
have it. He just doesn't have his audio on or something. Everybody can hear him.
Hello?
I can hear you. I can hear you. You just need to turn your audio on, dude. All right, I'm gonna come back to you. Figure out how to turn your freaking audio on, and then no, it's not an issue of leaving and rejoining. He just needs to literally turn his audio up. He's like his volume is actually like off. All right. I have the pinned link for if people want to call in. I have it pinned down there, so if folks want to call in, they can. But we are going to... Oh. Man, I got all kinds of people reaching out about collabs today. I got people reaching out about Tim Pool. I got Rachel Wilson hooking me up with a collab. Like, so shout out to all you guys. So thank you for that. All right. He left anyway, so maybe if he comes back later. Okay. So we're going to move on. So that's the stuff with people leaving. On the topic of Jews in Israel, which I know as you guys know, I barely ever talk about. That was a joke. Oh, no. There was a post. I guess they took it down. They always do this. They do this. There was a post where I think Joel Webbin quoted it. So maybe if I go to Joel Webbin's account, maybe I'll be able to find it. Because there was a Jewish account that literally posted that that gay pride is Jewish. I agree, dear brother Mario. We do need to collab. Oh man, of course they deleted it, bro. Of course they freaking deleted it. They always do this. They be posting like you guys know that screenshot that I showed you. Thank you for the comment on David regarding David Wood. You guys know that screenshot I always show you where like the Times of Israel literally stated that Jews do control the media, and then they like deleted it after. They always do this shit, man. They always do. They like post something and then they're like, just kidding. Like, I don't know if you guys saw this post yesterday. But like a Jewish account, it was literally like one of the, Jewish organizations on Twitter literally posted pride is Jewish. And I had it saved, but they deleted it. It's gone. So, well, just you guys can take my word for it. Okay. I think everybody knows that pride is Jewish. Everybody knows that. Gay pride is Jewish. That's all you need to know. Okay. All right. Let's dive into Iran. So there was some updates over the weekend with Iran, and a lot of you guys saw. In fact, there was even a Netanyahu quote today, a post on Twitter today, because Netanyahu was not happy with Trump, which I guess is a good sign, right? But he said this: tonight I spoke with President Trump, told him that if Hezbollah does not cease attacking our cities and citizens, Israel will attack terror targets in Beirut. This stance remains unchanged. In parallel, the IDF will continue to operate as planned in southern Lebanon. So this basically goes back to the start of the whole controversy when Marco Rubio, the post is still up on Jay's timeline. Okay, thanks, Rachel. I'll find that then. Marco Rubio explicitly said that, like, yeah, we weren't going to get involved in Iran, but then Israel said they were going to get involved regardless, so we had to step in. Like, that's basically what's happening again is Trump keeps trying to make a deal with the Iranians, right? And then Israel is like, nope, we're not done, because they're not going to stop until they get regime change. Israel is not going to stop. So we are going to either have to take the off-ramp and say, okay, you guys got it. It's all you. You're on your own. They either have to do that. We either have to do that, right? Or it's going to be Iraq. It's going to be Iraq 2.0. So those are like the two options that I see, because Israel is not going to stop until they get regime change. So why is this ad still running? My goodness. Oh, I think I have to literally like watch it. Jews. I mean, it is the media. Clipped. Anti-Semite. All right. Finally.
Breaking news out of the Middle East. Iran says it is suspending peace talks with the United States over Israel's recent attacks on Lebanon and Gaza. This, according to Iranian state media. Tehran also threatening to continue blocking the Strait of Hormuz. That announcement sending gas prices soaring more than 8% so far today as the fighting there continues. Just this morning, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announcing a new round of strikes on the southern suburbs of Beirut, where the IDF expanded its ground operations over the weekend. But hostilities have also escalated over the last few days between directly Iran and the United States. The U.S. military says it intercepted 2 Iranian ballistic missiles targeting American.
So this is all just in the last couple of days, by the way, because Trump was trying to say that he reached a deal with Iran. So this was
forces based in Kuwait. NBC
This news story was just yesterday.
News White House correspondent Monica Alba has been tracking all of this. She joins us now from the North Lawn of the White House. Monica, prior to this announcement, President Trump was reportedly editing a framework for a new deal with Iran, right? So we just heard from the president about these halted talks. What did he say?
Yeah, my colleague Garrett Hake, Sam, just got off the phone with President Trump a short time ago and asked him to respond to these reports from Iranian state media that they have halted their negotiations. And President Trump told Garrett that this was sort of news to him, that this is not something that had been formally or directly communicated to him at this point. But if that's the case, he says that that is fine, that the U.S. will continue to wait Iran out potentially here. But he also told Garrett that essentially that doesn't mean that U.S. major combat military operations are going to resume. He said, it doesn't mean we're going to start dropping bombs over there. We'll just go silent. We'll keep the blockade, referencing that naval blockade that has been in place to try to help some of those ships and vessels be able to get through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a critical component to all of this. But this,
yeah. So for those of you guys who don't know, the Strait of Hormuz is basically the linchpin of this entire conflict. And when the Iranians closed the Strait of Hormuz, that's a third of the world's fertilizer and a fifth of the world's oil and gas comes through the Strait of Hormuz. So that's basically the linchpin in this whole thing. And so that's why getting that reopened has been the biggest priority. And, you know, we keep getting promised, right? We keep getting promised that that this war is going to be over. Trump has declared victory several times. So in March, at a rally in Kentucky, Trump said the war in Iran is practically, it was over in the first hour. Before it even started, it was over. He said, we've won. And then again, in early April, he had multiple statements, right, saying that they were militarily defeated. Militarily defeated. No, it is 20%. It's 20% of the world's oil and a third of the world's fertilizer. A little over 30%. Then again, in April, he did the same thing. He said, total and complete victory, 100%. This was again him in April. On April 7th and April 8th, he said this. He made this comment. Then in mid to late April, he said that things are winding down. So how could they be winding down if we already won like 5 times? At this point, he's already said we've won like 5 times. Then again, on May 1st, in Florida, he was speaking, and he once again said that we've won the war in Iran. So it's like we keep winning this war, but somehow the war continues to wage on. So I'm not exactly sure what he means when he says we've won, because at this point, this war is continuing and with no end in sight. And like we saw from our boy Big Yahoo has made it very clear that this war is not going to end until they get regime change. It's very obvious. That guy never called back in, so I don't know. Okay. So we are a little coming up on an yeah. Yes. Yep. It is 1/5 of the world's oil. Thank you guys for the super chats. Got a couple of them here, and I'm going to be going over them at the end. As always, I'll be doing another members-only stream at the end of today. I had 2 new members, so welcome to memberships. Memberships are huge for supporting me regularly monthly as I do these streams a couple times a week, and I always try to do a members-only stream where I give you guys exclusive content. I gave you guys a sweet quote from St. Isidore 2 times ago, and then last time I gave you some stuff from Roman Catholics on cousin marriage that a lot of people don't know about. Today I got one from St. Augustine that I'm going to show you. That's definitely I'm not able to post on my main platforms. So you guys will see that quote if you sign up for memberships and you stick around for the members only stream at the end of today. All right, so I'm going to be reacting to a video. The reason why I'm not doing my own presentation for this
to some people
is because this video was excellent, and I I'm not gonna lie. I actually got emotional when I watched this the first time, and trigger warning, because I guess we have to do that now. No, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously, this is about the ethnic cleansing. There's also additional details that he doesn't include that I'm gonna show you guys throughout, because a lot of people don't know that between 12 and 14 million German civilians were ethnically cleansed out of certain lands, really throughout like Eastern Europe, right after World War II. And there was just some disgusting treatment from not only the Soviets, but the United States. We actually have a lot of blood on our hands from this event, and it's talked about by almost nobody. Almost nobody talks about this. And so, in fact, I wonder how many of you are hearing for the first time. You're telling me now for the first time. I didn't know that. That 12 to 14 million German civilians were ethnically cleansed following World War II. And I'm talking about people that were living in this land for hundreds of years. They had been in Eastern Europe. Ethnic Germans had been in Eastern Eastern European lands that they were forced out of for literally half a millennium. Over half a millennium. Some of them had been there since the 1400s. And they're getting ethnically cleansed from this land because they're ethnically German. So, like I said, I'm going to add detail to this, but this presentation was phenomenal. So, I'm going to piggyback off of his presentation. You got here, let me link the original video in the chat, and I'll also put it in my description. I forgot to do that. So that people that are interested can watch the original video on their own. But I am going to give you guys amplifying details because there was a lot of things that he actually missed. And I'll also say that, this hits close to home for me as I'm ethnically German. I'm ethnically American now because we've undergone ethnogenesis. But before that, I was ethnically German. I'm pretty much purely Germanic, as you guys can see from my blonde hair and green eyes. So, all that being said, let's dive into this video. It's excellent.
It was the start of a new nightmare. As the Allies celebrated their victory over the genocidal Nazi regime, Europe was experiencing the start of another ethnic cleansing that would target millions of people purely because of the way they were born or the language they spoke. Millions of innocent people would be removed from their ancestral homes, stripped of their rights and dignity, and told that they deserved it. Torture, rape, and murder awaited hundreds of thousands of them. Today, on A Day in History, we uncover the story of the forgotten atrocity that reshaped Europe, the ethnic cleansing of over 12 million Germans. The first thing to understand is that the German people have existed long before the German nation-state. Germany only unified as a country in 1871. But the German people and language have been a feature of Europe for 2,000 years. While most of them live in the lands that we now recognize as Germany and Austria, German minorities could be found in almost every corner of Europe. After the First World War, millions of Germans ended up as minorities in newly created nation-states following the Treaty of Versailles. These newly created or recreated nations like Czechoslovakia and Poland weren't happy to have Germans in their country. And nor were the Germans happy to be there either. The Sudetenland on the Czech-German border was a perfect example. Despite being majority German, they were denied independence or unification with Germany and were instead rolled into Czechoslovakia, where they were a neglected, sometimes outright persecuted minority. Hitler used these German minorities to justify his expansion in the late 1930s. His union with Austria and the annexation of the Sudetenland in 1938 were met with a weak reaction because many in Europe quietly agreed that all the Germans deserved to be unified. Of course, Hitler...
Yeah, and by the way, Austria voted, I think it was like 98%, because they voted whether or not to be absorbed into Germany under Hitler, and it was like 98% of the population voted yes.
Hitler's invasion of the rest of Czechoslovakia in March 1939 proved that these minorities were only a pretext for further conquest. Given that Europe's German minorities were intrinsically linked to the start of Hitler's expansion, it's no surprise that blame stuck after his defeat. The very existence of the German minorities was seen as one of the causes of the war, with a Nazi...
So this guy is clearly a normie. Those of you who are educated know that basically at every stopping point throughout the war, Hitler offered a peace deal. And so, obviously this guy's a normie, and, that's not the substance of this video that I want you guys to kind of pay attention to. Obviously, that's what he's saying is true to an extent, but there is some nuance, which, like, once again, like Dunkirk, for example, like Dunkirk is like portrayed as like this, this beautiful, this, miraculous, military event by the French and the British, when in reality Hitler actually was offering them a peace deal, which is why he wasn't wiping out their forces during Dunkirk. So some interesting stuff.
Persecuting entire ethnic groups on the basis of their race and birth, it felt like justice to many to turn it back on the Germans after Hitler's downfall. This revenge took many forms. The desolation of German cities like Dresden and the mass rape of German women by the Red Army are well.
Yeah, and if you guys read, so General Patton actually talks about this, particularly we allowed the Soviets to be the ones to take Berlin. And Patton was actually very upset about this because he knew that the Soviets were going to be brutal to the German civilians. And basically, he makes the point that he was critical of Eisenhower for allowing this to happen because he believed that we could have just taken Berlin and we would have been much more civil, right, with the German civilians that were living there, whereas the Soviets were, basically raping and pillaging all their women. And then, yeah, the bombing of Dresden, he mentions. I appreciate him bringing that up because that's also another one that's kind of glossed over by historians. But there was really no military targets in Dresden, right? And Churchill literally bombed the royal shit out of it with the Royal Air Force and wiping out significant civilian populations in Dresden. So you guys can look up Dresden. Churchill was a horrible man, by the way. Churchill was a horrible man. He caused the mass genocide of Indians via starvation in what is now known as Pakistan, but ethnically Indians. And the bombing of Dresden was a moral atrocity. You guys can read. Actually, Pat Buchanan has the book Hitler, Churchill, and the Unnecessary War, and that's an excellent book that covers a lot of this material.
Known, but less attention was paid to what happened outside of Germany itself. The Allies were making plans to remove the Germans long before they'd actually won. As early as 1942, some of the Allied powers were discussing the mass resettlement of ethnic Germans out of Poland and other strategic areas, anticipating the removal of some 6 million people. However, with Soviet successes in 1943 shifting the tide of the war, expectations changed for a full Soviet occupation of Eastern Europe. At the Tehran Conference in November 1943, Churchill and Roosevelt agreed with Stalin that the borders of post-war Germany and Poland would be the Oder-Neisse line. All of the 4 million Germans east of that line would have to be removed as well. The British and the Soviets led the way for these so-called population transfers. Churchill was its strongest advocate, believing that the ethnic peoples of Europe should be disentangled to avoid future wars. In a speech before Parliament in December 1944, Churchill declared his support for the total ethnic cleansing of Germans from Polish territories. It was believed that the death toll...
And you can see, this is a man who's literally considered a now in the history books, right, a hero, but you can see he was literally, his moral character was disgusting. He was a drunkard, and so he hired most of his speeches, his famous speeches, were literally the famous speeches were a voice actor. He hired a voice actor because he was a drunk, and so he didn't have the ability to actually give these speeches, and so he hired a voice actor for it.
Germany itself would leave enough room for the deported Germans from elsewhere to move in. The Germans of Eastern Europe were aware of the fate awaiting them. Starting in the winter of 1944, some 4 million ethnic Germans fled Eastern Europe ahead of the Red Army's advance. Traveling through the winter months, these refugees were exposed to serious danger as they traveled through war zones and freezing temperatures to reach Germany. Tens of thousands died from hypothermia as they tried to flee. The Nazis considered these refugees to be cowards and offered no protection or support. with some regional Gauleiters declaring it illegal for ethnic Germans to flee even as the Red Army was knocking down their door. By the summer of 1945, an estimated 100,000 German refugees were flooding into war-ravaged Germany every week, adding to the strain of the country's millions of
So how can these people possibly be blamed, right, for, whatever your view is, right, on the German National Socialists, how can they be blamed when they're being ostracized by them too?
Internal refugees.
So people like to say, "Oh, this was revenge for Nazism." It's like, well, how can that possibly be when these people had nothing to do with Nazism?
Wasn't enough food or shelter for them, and many would perish from starvation and exposure. At the Potsdam Conference in July, the Allies had to agree to pause the deportations into Germany because the numbers were just unmanageable. However, they also reiterated their commitment to getting the deportations done eventually. The ethnic cleansing of Germans played out slightly differently in different countries. In 1942, the Czech government in exile confirmed it would be seeking the expulsion of 1 million Germans after the war. True to its word, the first act of the restored Czech government was to strip every ethnic German of citizenship until they could prove that they had taken part in anti-fascist activity, which only a minority could claim. The German occupation of Czechoslovakia had been horrific. The Nazis had sent Reinhard Heydrich, one of the chief architects of the Holocaust, and a man considered psychopathic even by Nazi leadership to run the occupation government. His nickname of the Butcher of Prague was well-deserved. Although he'd been assassinated in 1942, the scars of the occupation were still fresh. For the Czechs, victory was
It's actually good that the reason why I chose this, there's a couple good presentations on this. The reason why I chose this one is you guys can see this guy is like totally normie, but he's still pointing out the objective historical accuracy, right, of this ethnic cleansing narrative that nobody talks about and most people don't even know about.
Chance to avenge themselves upon the Germans. The Czechs passed sweeping laws to punish the Germans. Taking a hint from Nazi anti-Semitic policies, all ethnic Germans were required to wear white armbands marked with the letter N for Nemetz, the Czech word for German. And it was illegal for Germans to gather in large numbers. All German businesses were dissolved or seized by the state, while Germans were also banned from public parks, trains, restaurants, and even walking on the sidewalk. Czech troops were already rounding up Germans in the Sudetenland by mid-May 1945. Deportations were quick. Soldiers would arrive in a town or village and go door by door telling the deportees they had 30 minutes to grab their things and report for deportation. Some were driven across...
By the way, there's a lot of similarities. I just did a video on the Nakba with the Palestinian population because there's a lot of similarities between what happened with the German civilians, right, in Eastern Europe and the Palestinian population in the Nakba in 1948. Very similar, basically exactly what he just described, where, you literally have soldiers knocking and saying, you need to get your things, you're being deported. The exact same thing happened to the Palestinians, 750,000 of them, in fact, according to UN records, in the Nakba.
The border to Germany, where they would be left to fend for themselves. Others were placed into concentration or labor camps for the time being, with all men and women over the age of 14 required to work for the state. Conditions in these camps were wretched, with high rates of disease and death. Many of these camps were run by Soviet soldiers who abused German civilians en masse. Between May and August alone, some 500,000 Germans had been officially rounded up in Czech territory, and hundreds of thousands more would follow. However, deportations were not enough to satisfy the anger of the Czech people. Massacres of German civilians by soldiers, partisans, and lynch mobs were common. The exact numbers are unknown, but there were certainly hundreds of individual examples, ranging from just one family to hundreds of people at once. On the night of June 18, 1945, 260 Germans were massacred by Czech and Slovak soldiers in the city of Prerov. Of the victims, 120 were women and 74 were children. Also in June, 30,000 Germans were rounded up in the city of Brno. Many were imprisoned in the Konitz college camps, which the Gestapo had used as a prison during the occupation. Some 300 Germans were hanged there in the following weeks, and the rest deported to concentration camps on the Austrian border, a trek which killed several hundred more. There was also a well-recorded massacre of Germans in Ustin and Laben where 43 Germans were shot, bayoneted, or drowned in the river by lynch mobs, who blamed them for an explosion at a nearby ammunition depot. The single worst atrocity befell the Germans of Jatetz, who were deported on a forced march to nearby Postoloprty in early June. What followed was the single largest post-war massacre of Germans. According to one survivor, the inciting incident was the execution of 5 German boys between the ages of 10 and 15 who had been caught stealing food. The boys were lined up against the wall of the nearby barracks and shot. This was taken as a signal to begin killing more. Over the following 5 days, between 800 and 2,000 more German civilians were murdered, their bodies thrown into mass graves. Czechoslovakia counted the removal of almost 3 million Germans by the time official persecution ended in 1948. Most of the Germans who remained would self-deport in the following years. Things were bad in Czechoslovakia, but they were worse in Poland.
So, like, a quick way to see if a Christian really does care about, like, racism, right? Or, like, ethnic discrimination is to, like, ask them about this. Like, what about the German population? I mean, he goes over the other examples, like it was worse in Poland, but this was just the Czech example, right? Where because they were ethnically German, they're literally being lynched, massacred, full hundreds of them, of civilians, women and children being massacred, right? For being ethnically German. And how many of you have actually heard of this?
Poland had even more ethnic Germans in its land, and even more anger at them than the Czechs. Poland had another complication, as it had lost land in the east to the Soviet Union, resulting in millions of displaced Poles. The Polish government needed the Germans out of the way so they could resettle these Poles in their place. But between Nazi and Soviet invasions, Poland was in ruins at war's end. The new authorities were struggling to establish themselves, and so Poland was in no position to oversee the safe or...
This is kind of how I feel for, like, you know, I basically, people are trying to paint a swastika on my forehead for literally believing that white people shouldn't be exterminated off the face of the earth. It's like, these people had nothing to do with the Nazi regime. Like, regardless of what your opinion is, right, of Nazism, right? These people had nothing to do with it. They were living in these Eastern European lands, once again, for half a millennium. They had nothing to do with it. And because they were ethnically German, and if they couldn't prove that they were actively fighting against the Nazis, they have a swastika painted on their forehead. They're lynched en masse. Women and children. What could you possibly have asked a child to do? A 10-year-old boy to do?
orderly deportation of millions of people. While the Polish government did play a role in organizing deportations, for example, they deported some 300,000 Germans from the 50-kilometer stretch east of the Oder to clear the way to settle ex-soldiers. They had to rely on the Germans deporting themselves too. The official policy of Polish communists was to create conditions in Poland that were so hostile to ethnic Germans that most would choose to leave by themselves. In the words of one Polish army commander to his troops, "You must perform your tasks in such a stern and decisive manner that the German vermin do not hide in the houses, but flee of their own accord." They didn't have to work hard to make this happen.
I'm so glad the good guys won World War II, the Soviets. I'm so glad the Soviets won World War II, the good guys. The good guys. Thank God the good guys won.
Ethnic hatred was intense after the horrendous experiences of the war. The vast majority of Poland's 25 million ethnic Poles fully supported the expulsion of the country's Germans. Like in Czechoslovakia, the Germans first had to be rounded up. Millions of Germans were forced into urban ghettos, converted barracks, and former prisons, and, in some cases, repurposed Nazi concentration camps. A nation already struggling to house and feed its citizens had little to spare for its enemies. Disease and starvation tore through the German prisoners, while abuse from soldiers and civilians alike claimed yet more lives. No one relished in the persecution of these Germans quite like Solomon Morel. Morel was just 26 years old, but he'd already worked as a prison warden for the Soviets. He was also Jewish and had lost his parents at Auschwitz. So he had plenty of reasons to hate Nazis. So, when the Polish government decided to reopen the Zgoda camp, a sub-camp of Auschwitz to imprison German civilians, it was a perfect assignment for him. Morel ran Zgoda as his own personal revenge upon the Germans. He treated women and children as if they'd been responsible for Auschwitz, inflicting torture and abuse on them that would have fit any description of the Holocaust. Morel and his guards would toy with prisoners for their own amusement. For example, they'd force prisoners to make human pyramids that the guards would walk over, crushing the people beneath. Prisoners were given little food and no medical care, even as a vicious typhus epidemic cut through the camp. The day's dead would be buried in the mass grave by the surviving prisoners every night. But survivors admitted that they sometimes got so hungry that they ate the bodies instead. Conditions were so bad at Zgoda that inmates would throw themselves on the electrical fences just to make the suffering end. Of the 6,000 people held in Zgoda during the 8 months of Polish control, 2,000 died. Not until Polish independence.
So, well, that was actually a good. So I wanted to comment on this. There were no good guys in World War II among the major powers. I agree with this, including the United States. I mean, think about what we did to the Japanese population, right? Not just in the camps domestically, but in the nuclear warfare, right, on Nagasaki, which was the most Christian city in Japan, and Hiroshima, of course, right? So somehow we're the morally superior ones when we decided to annihilate hundreds of thousands of civilians, right? That is never acceptable. From a Christian framework, that is not ever acceptable. And the notion that the Japanese, at this point the Germans had already surrendered, the notion that the Japanese, we had to demand surrender from them as if they were going to attack, as if they were going to invade the US. After the Germans were already gone, they were already surrendered, right? And then the island hopping campaign by the Marine Corps, which was basically wiping them out one by one, the Japanese bases in each one of those islands. So the Japanese were not in a position to be able to invade the US or anybody. They were done. So the notion that our only options were either to invade Japan or to nuke them is utter nonsense. There's no reason why we couldn't have just pulled out of the war at that point. There's zero reason why we wouldn't have been able to do that. And by the way, I used to be a guy who would defend this. I used to be like, well, the civilian fatalities would have been in the millions if we hadn't nuked them. That's all propaganda. It's all nonsense. It's all nonsense.
In the 1990s, did anyone try to bring Morel to account for his actions? But he fled to Israel to avoid punishment and was protected there until his death in 2007. Poland counted for the majority of the German expulsions in Europe. By the time they stopped in 1950, over 8 million had been expelled. While most of the Germans in Poland were removed, not all of them were. The Polish government identified certain minority German groups as being secretly Polish. That is, their true identity was Polish, but many at the time identified more as Germans. The Schlonzaks of Silesia, the Kashubs of Pomerania, and the Mazurs of East Prussia had been more Germans than Poles, but most were given Polish citizenship and incorporated into the Polish nation. Poland and Czechoslovakia saw most of the German expulsions, but several other countries deserve attention. Most of Yugoslavia's German population had already left by the time the war ended. The arrival of the Red Army in October 1944 had sent most of them running anyway. In early 1945, the remaining Germans were rounded up and placed in temporary camps, although thousands were shot by communist partisans as well. Around 30,000 Germans, 90% of whom were women, were deported from Yugoslavia to forced labor camps in the USSR before Germany was even defeated. In March 1945, the remaining Germans were relocated to rural village camps. Those who were well enough to work were made to do so, while those who couldn't were kept in separate camps. These camps for the non-workers were dismal places of disease and unrestrained abuse. As many as 50% of those who entered these camps never came out again.
By the way, the good guys of World War II, the Americans. So it wasn't just the Soviets that committed moral atrocities against the German civilians. We, under Eisenhower, created an entirely new category of prisoner called disarmed enemy forces, which allowed prisoners of war, which allowed them to not be held under the Geneva Convention. So there's certain requirements under the Geneva Convention which you have to give to prisoners of war, right? You have to basically they need to at least maintain their humanity, right? And so they need to be fed and things of that nature, clothed. He created an entire new category for the camps of the Germans so that he didn't have to do that. This classification enabled Allied forces to avoid responsibilities regarding feeding and housing. The good guys of World War II did this. Us. I was furious when I found this out. This was like a moment for me when I found this out. Because look, like nobody is defending the Nazis, dude. It's not what I'm saying. Okay? Like that's a whole different discussion. I'm talking about the winners of World War II were objectively they were wicked, evil men. Objectively, without a question. This is not something that a moral someone grounded in Christianity, this is not something they do. So no, we were not the good guys of World War II. We were maybe a little bit better than a few of the others by like a slim margin.
And they were accurately described as extermination camps. Children who survived this ordeal were sent away to state-run orphanages or given to Yugoslav families and were forbidden to speak German. By the early 1950s, most of Yugoslavia's German prisoners were released, and most of these would go on to leave Yugoslavia entirely, so that by the 1960s, the country's German minority had all but disappeared. Based on Yugoslav records, historians believe that over 7,000 Yugoslav Germans were killed by partisans, over 48,000 died in the camps, and another 2,000 vanished into the Soviet gulags during and after 1945. Also notable was the fate of German children who fled into Lithuania. Most were orphans from East Prussia and Königsberg, which was taken by the Soviets with heavy casualties in January 1945. Around 45,000 of these orphans fled into the wilderness of Lithuania, where they became known as the Wolf Children. These wolf children roamed the countryside where they survived by scavenging or stealing from the local population, often being mistreated or chased away by the local Lithuanians. Many of these children died, while others were adopted into Lithuanian families, where their German identity was stripped away. Check out our video on the wolf children for more information on these forgotten victims of the war. Hungary and Romania posed unique problems, since they had been German allies for most of the war. The German minorities there were relatively small and had not been a source of conflict like they had in Poland or the Sudetenland. The primary reason for the expulsion of Germans in these countries appeared to have been communist control. The ethnic Germans were seen as a potential source of anti-communist sentiment, which authorities could address by linking it to the broader expulsions of Germans. The Germans in these areas were also generally well off and owned a lot of land, especially in Hungary. where the Germans had one.
This is what they do, by the way, and we see this in the entire like post-World War II era in the United States with the individual Theodore Adorno, right? So Theodore Adorno was one of the prominent figures in the 1960s, during the time of the sexual revolution and things of that nature. And he and a couple other Jewish individuals came up with what's called the F scale. And the F scale basically was like this metric for determining whether or not someone was a fascist. And the way they would justify if you were a fascist is if you like were pro-family and you believed in like white people like being able to have children. Like that was like one of the metrics that like made you a fascist. And so this is the sentiment that the communists do. They take the fascists, most of whom took things too far, and they leverage that to commit moral atrocities against people who had nothing to do with it. These are ethnic Germans who had nothing to do with any of the fascist regimes. And yet they're being blamed for it because they're ethnically German. That's anti-Christian. As a Christian, you ought to stand against that. And you ought to educate people about this. This is a normie. This guy has demonstrated multiple times in this video, he's a total normie. And he's pointing out the objective historicity of this.
Formed part of the social elite of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Removing them would make communist land reforms much simpler. Hungary's Germans were counted alongside Polish and Czech as one of the top priorities for deportation at Potsdam. After some debate, German citizens were stripped of their political rights in October 1945, but Hungary was one of the few countries to argue against collective German punishment. Nevertheless, the Allies demanded the expulsion of 500,000 Hungarian Germans, mostly to the American-occupied zone in Germany. This was a problem, partially because there weren't even that many Hungarian Germans to begin with. Hungary also protested that most of its Germans were women, children, and elderly, and had done nothing to deserve punishment for Nazi crimes. Despite this, Allied pressure forced the government to accept the total deportation of all German speakers. The deportations were rushed and chaotic, but the Hungarians ensured that trains weren't too overcrowded.
So, did you hear what he just said? This one is insane. So, in Hungary, the ethnic cleansing took place, right? And the Hungarian government itself was opposed to it. The Hungarian government itself was saying, no, these Germans have been here. They had nothing to do with the Nazi regime. And no, we're not going to let them be forced deported. And yet, the Allied forces forced the Hungarian government to bend the knee.
Evacuees were provided with food, clothes, and medical staff for the journey. About 100,000 Germans were deported in the first 6 months of 1946. Expulsions continued later that year, but the scope was gradually reduced. Essential workers like miners and craftsmen were exempted, as were most of the remaining poor and working-class Germans. Still, by the time deportations ended
So in Hungary, they had been there for 200 to 250 years before their expulsion. So these people were like long before World War II. These people had been living there. This would be like us being expelled from, this would be like a heritage American being expelled from America because of their ethnicity. That would be like what this is like.
In June 1948, around 200,000 Germans had been expelled from Hungary. Similarly, Romania experienced a confused mix of deportations for their former allies, but on a smaller scale. Most ethnic Germans left ahead of the collapse of the pro-Nazi Romanian government in 1944. In January 1945, the Soviets pressured Bucharest to deport 100,000 Germans to the USSR to work in labor camps as punishment, which it had no choice but to agree to. 10,000 of these Romanian Germans died in the camps. The rest were released in 1949, but were sent to Soviet-occupied East Germany instead of returning home. For the 40,000 or so Romanian Germans who did eventually return to Romania later, they found their former land and property seized by the state. and redistributed to ethnic Romanians. The treatment of the Germans improved significantly after the winter of 1945. In November 1945, the Allies signed new agreements to regulate the deportations to decrease deaths, while the anger from the war and desire for revenge on the Germans began to fade. The major Allied powers agreed to help the smaller nations manage humane and
this picture is just on its face. Like these are, at least two. Like we can talk about, America's role, right? But like Churchill and Stalin, like objectively evil men, right? And this was who we were allied with.
orderly deportations, which were done with much less violence and robbery. For example, from February 1946, 2 trainloads of Germans carrying around 2,400 people ran from Czechoslovakia to the American-occupied zone of Germany every day. Evacuees were also given food, clothes, and medical care from charity organizations like the Red Cross. This was still an ethnic cleansing, still the removal of millions of people for the crime of being the wrong ethnicity and speaking the wrong language, but the conditions were undeniably better than they'd been before. Persecution ended by the 1950s, but there would be no accountability. The world did not want to recognize that the Germans had suffered any wrongdoing. To admit as such would be to undermine the simple good versus evil narrative of the war. It took until the 1990s for any significant attention to be paid to the issue outside of Germany, but by then it was too late to do anything. Take Solomon Morel, who continued to work for the NKVD and Polish communist authorities after the closure of the Zagota camp. After the fall of communism, the Polish government did investigate him for crimes against German civilians, but Morel fled to Israel to escape prosecution. The Polish government demanded his extradition to stand trial, but Israel blocked it.
Well. Isn't that curious? Isn't that curious? Thank you guys for the super chats. I'm going to be going over them at the end, of course. And I still got to go. I still got the whole Greater Israel presentation that I'm going to be going over after this. So
protecting him
sure
until his death in 2007.
I don't know why it keeps doing this. I think it's YouTube bugging out because...
In all, around 12 million Germans had been expelled from across Eastern Europe. At least 500,000 Germans died from disease, violence, exhaustion, exposure, or other causes of death, with some estimates surpassing 2 million. These actions were conscious attempts to eradicate the presence of German culture, language, and people in the affected areas.
Early May.
All right. So as you guys can see, sorry, I was just getting some stuff together for my members only stream after, because I got some good content I want to show you after we get through the Greater Israel stuff. But as you guys can see, like this is a moral atrocity, right, that occurred really at the hands of the Allied powers, right, the Americans and of course the Soviets, and yet it's very rarely even discussed, right? It's very rarely even talked about in history books. I mean, how many of you guys, I'm curious, did anybody learn about the ethnic cleansing of German populations in their history books in school? Or those of you who did know about it, was it from other sources? I'm curious, chat. You let me know. And those that are watching back in the recording, I'm curious for you guys too. So leave it in the comments which one it is, if any of you actually learned about it in school. Wow. Yeah, some people are saying they didn't know any of it. This is why I do content on it. First time hearing of it. Yeah, and I mean you guys can see like this is not a year ago. You guys can see, like, this is not conspiracy, okay? Like, simple Google search. How many ethnic Germans were cleansed after World War II? Between 12 and 14 million were expelled or fled from Eastern and Central Europe between 1944 and 1950, making it one of the largest single forced migrations in any European population in modern history. West German government historically estimated 2 million deaths. So 2 million people died, and 14 million of them were displaced. Yeah, some of the people have learned about the atrocities that the Soviets committed, but rarely do we hear about who the actual victims are or the scale, right? The scale of the victims. Someone said he got a 4.3 on the F scale. All right. So I wanted to put you guys on to that. Those of you who are interested in learning more about it, there are plenty of resources out there. Unfortunately, they're not taught in school because old Robert Maxwell. Do you guys know about this? Do you guys? I wonder if you guys know about this. I don't think I've put y'all onto this one yet. So you guys know Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, because of all the Epstein stuff. But how many of you guys knew that her father is responsible for basically all of our textbooks in school? How many of you guys knew this? Owner of Maxwell Communications Corporation held massive stake in educational publishing and school textbooks in the 1980s and early 90s. So he's responsible for basically the majority of our school textbooks. So no wonder you're not taught about these things, because that's who is teaching you things in school, which is why the entire school system needs to basically hit a giant reset. By the way, the Department of Education was formed at the tail end. Really, like, okay, look, the 1960s were like the worst period in American history. And that's also when you get like the Department of Education being formed. And guess what? But before then, the U.S. was actually like top of the world in education. Top of the world in education in almost every category. And then after the Department of Education was formed, we basically tanked. We basically completely tanked on those things. We all went to kosher schools. You guys seen those Reddit posts? There's like Reddit posts of teachers saying they're like third graders are calling the food goy slop. So we might be back. All right, let's talk about Greater Israel, and then we'll call it a day. So I just want to go through a few brief things with Greater Israel agenda. So just for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with Greater Israel, so if you like look it up, it's like, so Zionists will call you a conspiracy theory for talking about this, but it's far from a conspiracy theory. So there are two different primary uses of the term Greater Israel, one referring to narrowly to the area internationally recognized as part of the state of Israel, along with the Golan Heights, which we just gave to Israel. We just gave to Israel in 2019. Trump signed off on that, by the way. West Bank and Gaza, so Palestine, basically. And then a second definition referring to the much larger region stretching from the river Nile to the Euphrates. So we're going to be talking about this second definition here today, okay? Because the second definition is way more prevalent than the first one. So the Greater Israel Agenda, like I said, if you bring this up to a Zionist, they're gonna call you a conspiracy theory. They're gonna label you a conspiracy theorist. Well, it turns out Benjamin Netanyahu is a conspiracy theorist because here is him presenting the Greater Israel Agenda, the new Middle East. Ooh, the new and improved, the new world order, the new Middle East, in which occupied Palestinian territories and Golan Heights are part of Israel at the UN General Assembly in September of 2023. Wow. So this conspiracy theory is being presented to the United Nations by Benjamin Netanyahu. Wow. What a conspiracy theory. Here's a Jewish politician in Israel. This is the promised land, the promise of God to the patriarchs of the Jewish nation, encompassing Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, and Saudi Arabia. Such an interesting conspiracy theory here that I wonder why these Jewish politicians are spouting off this conspiracy theory. Don't they know that the Greater Israel Agenda is not real? Like this commenter just said? Don't these Jewish politicians, don't they know it's not real? Someone needs to tell them it's not real. So this dates all the way back to the founder of Zionism. And I'll show you guys a journal entry, a diary entry from Theodor Herzl. So Theodor Herzl is basically considered the founder of Zionism. And as you can see, so he explicitly says, right? So in his diary, he explicitly describes Greater Israel as from the Brook of Egypt to the Euphrates, right? And this map looks pretty familiar with what we just saw Netanyahu talking about. So isn't that interesting? So once again, someone needs to let people know that this Theodor Herzl guy, the founding father of Zionism, he's spouting off this heresy, this conspiracy theory, this Greater Israel conspiracy theory. Why is he spouting this off? This founder of Zionism. Isn't that interesting? There was basically the precursor to the Likud Party. So the Likud Party, for those of you who don't know, the Likud Party is it's the far right in Israel, and they basically dominate the government now. So ever since the centrists kind of blew up the bridge with old Bibi, old Big Yahoo, they basically run the show in Israel, the Likud Party. And they're the sort of like precursor to them was this guy here, and I want to show you, because he literally penned a poem about this. But for the modern Likud Party, their precursor was this guy right here. Which, by the way, they always change their name, which is interesting to me. Does anybody else do that? Does anybody else change their name? I don't know. It's very bizarre to me that this is so common amongst Jewish individuals that they change their name so frequently. But like I said, precursor to the Likud Party, and he penned the East Bank of the Jordan, which is a famous poem. Now talking about the two banks, right? And this is essentially referencing the borders of the Greater Israel Agenda. So the precursor to the entire right-wing party in Israel, right, authored an entire poem dedicated to the Greater Israel agenda. This conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory, Greater Israel. Yeah. The founder of the Likud party. Someone needs to educate these people, okay? Founder of Zionism, founder of the Likud party. Someone needs to educate these guys, okay, that this Greater Israel thing, it's a total conspiracy. All right, it's not real. So somebody needs to educate, okay? Because it's getting out of control. These conspiracy theories, they're just getting out of control. You know what I mean? What about the prime minister, the first prime minister of Israel, Ben-Gurion, who, by the way, was the head of the Haganah, which was a terrorist organization that blew up a ship, ended up killing a bunch of Jews. In fact, let me show you guys this. So, like I said, I like to show you guys this stuff. Kind of in bite sizes, so that you can get educated on it, and I don't like overwhelm you with info. So the Haganah, of which Ben-Gurion was the head of, who was the first prime minister of Israel, they basically tried to blow up this ship, the SS Patria, and ended up, so they killed over 200 people, majority of which were Jews. So they accidentally end up killing a bunch of Jews while trying to attack the Brits. But these guys were literally a terrorist organization, and this was Israel's first prime minister. And I haven't even touched the King David Hotel stuff, right? A lot of you guys know about the King David Hotel, because the King David Hotel was another terror attack. That one was carried out by the Irgun, of which the commander was who became Prime Minister Begin. So he was a prime minister of Israel later on. He was literally responsible for a terrorist attack. So at least two of their prime ministers were literally responsible for actual terrorist attacks. But here's Ben-Gurion explicitly saying, in regards to the Peel Commission and the founding of the nation state, this is because this increase in possession is of consequence not only in itself, but because through it we increase in strength, and every increase in strength helps the possession of the land as a whole. The establishment of a state, even if only in portion of a land, is the maximal reinforcement of our strength at the present time, and a powerful boost in our historical endeavors to liberate the entire country. So he's clearly pointing out that he's not satisfied, right, by the current borders. And he says elsewhere, we shall smash these frontiers which are being forced upon us, and not necessarily by war. I believe an agreement between us and the Arab state could be reached in the not too distant future. So, and then he says elsewhere, so here he was being charitable in his language, but if you look elsewhere, he explicitly says that they're going to expel the Arabs. So this was clearly just diplomacy that he's exercising. But if you look elsewhere, it's very obvious that he didn't care how it was done, how they got this land. All he cared about was expelling the Arabs. So that's Ben-Gurion, literally the first prime minister of Israel. So so far, we've got the first prime minister of Israel talking about Greater Israel. We got the founder, precursor to the Likud party, talk about Greater Israel. We got the founder of Zionism talking about Greater Israel. So I'm trying to figure out, right? Why these people, all these fundamental figures in Israel's history, why do they keep spouting this I keep saying heresy, this conspiracy theory? Why do they keep spouting this conspiracy theory? So I'm not going to go into super detail with the Yunon plan, but you guys can dig into this yourself. But the Yunon plan was basically a step towards this Greater Israel agenda. And the reason why this one is particularly interesting right, is that this was like this was literally an actual plan, right? So it's like one thing to say, okay, look, like, it might be the case that these other guys are talking about the greater Israel agenda, but did they actually believe in it? Did they actually want to further this greater Israel agenda? Welcome to the Legionaries. What's the matter? You guys can join at the end here for a stream. For members only, because I'm going to be going over a Saints quote. What I do at all my members only streams, I give you guys exclusive content. Usually it's a Saints quote that's a little bit too edgy for the main stream. So you guys can stick around after, and I'll be going over that. So this was an actual plan, the Unknown plan, right, to implement the greater Israel agenda. And so once again, I'm trying to figure out why everyone and their mother involved in Israeli leadership keeps spreading this nonsense conspiracy theory. I'm trying to figure out. So we got Netanyahu now, according to the Times of Israel, right? We got Netanyahu now, according to the Times of Israel, saying he's on a historic and spiritual mission. So he sees this as divinely appointed. He sees the greater Israel agenda as something that they have been granted by God. This is why Israel is really, if the nation state could be an antichrist, it would be Israel, right? Now it's possible that Netanyahu is a type of antichrist. I don't believe he's the big A antichrist, but I'm sorry, if you're talking about a historic and spiritual mission that you believe has been divinely granted to you, right? This greater Israel agenda. So once again, the prime minister, the longest sitting prime minister of Israel, is here spouting a conspiracy theory, the greater Israel agenda. When I pointed this out on David Wood, when I said that we as Orthodox reject the greater Israel agenda that is pushed by Benjamin Netanyahu and by his finance minister, I got called a conspiracy theorist for this. Here's our ambassador to Israel, Huckabee, saying, in reference to Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, and Syria, it would be fine if they took it all. It would be fine if they took it all. So that's American leadership also spreading this. You guys can see, this is like a brief history of like how their borders have expanded. So current state of Israel emerged from the British mandate of Palestine. That's what Ben-Gurion was talking about, that he was not satisfied with. The mandate created by the League of Nations in the wake of World War I and occupied by Palestine by the British geographically limits Israel upon its creation. 1948 war followed, and the mandate led to Israel taking control of all of mandatory Palestine. Sorry, that's what Ben-Gurion was referencing. With the exception of the West Bank and Gaza Strip, but Israel soon expanded by force in 1967. It defeated Arab forces, took control of the West Bank and Gaza, as well as Egypt's Sinai Peninsula, Syria's occupied Golan Heights, which again, 2019, the U.S. allowed Israel to annex. Israel continues to occupy all of these regions with the exception of Sinai, which it returned to Egypt in 1982. Since then, Israel has ignored international law, continued occupying Palestinian Syrian land, has shown little respect for its neighbor's sovereignty. Yeah, I mean, like the finance minister explicitly says that he wants to annex Jordan. They're very open about this, you guys. Like, it blows my mind. It blows my mind that there are people that accuse me of conspiracy when this is literally what every single major figure from the beginning of Zionism at the end of the 19th century, leading into the founder of the Likud party, all the way up to the first prime minister of Israel, culminating with then a plan implemented in the 1980s to accomplish this, and then culminating with the current Prime Minister of Israel, who has said that he's attached to the greater Israel agenda. So I'm trying to figure out where exactly the conspiracy is. I'm trying to figure it out. Just trying to identify exactly where the conspiracy is. When literally everybody and their mother in Israeli history is talking about this. So, all that being said, we're wrapping up, obviously, for the day. We covered a lot of ground. I told you guys at the beginning of my streams, when I did my second episode, I told you guys that I'm going to be kind of all over the place with my streams, okay? That's just kind of how I am. And so, yeah, we covered stuff with the Iran war. We covered, of course, all of the current events going on with all the upcoming debates and interviews, things of that nature. I'll, of course, be back. Thank you for the super chats. I'm going to go over super chats here in a moment. I actually, OBS screwed me over here because some of my super chats are gone. But I have a bunch of them to go over here before I dive into the members only stream. So if you guys want to be part of the members only stream, that's going to be happening here in a few minutes after I'm done with reading super chats. Please like and subscribe, guys, if you're not already subscribed to my channel. This was a great stream. Obviously, we covered a lot of ground from the ethnic cleansing of Germans to the greater Israel agenda. I'll be back live Thursday for a live react stream like I always do every Thursday. And of course, thank you for all the support via the super chats and the memberships. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. All right, let's cover the super chats. I apologize. Some of your guys' super chats disappeared on me. So I'm very sorry for that. I will dig them up and thank you during the next stream. How about that? So first of all, I did get a PayPal donation from Nathan. Doesn't look like he left a comment, but thank you, Nathan, for that super chat. Alfred, I appreciate all the work you're doing, brother. God bless you. Glory to God. America will be holy. Lord willing, it will. Our resident Indian with the Indian tax. Thank you, Sayaba, for your super chat. Love this. We'll fund your future campaign. Lord willing. Lord willing, yes. All right. So with that being said, please follow me on all platforms. Real Ben Michael on all platforms. I'll be back live Thursday for my normal React stream, and then Saturday I'll probably be back over on Fearless Truth for our live debate stream where we debate Muslims. You guys can check out that in the description from our last week stream. So with that being said, let's get the members only live stream going here. All right, so in 1 minute, it's going to cut to a members only stream. If you are interested in that, you can sign up for memberships. I have exclusive Saints quotes that I show you guys. And I have 2 members-only streams already available. And then I also do live Q&A during the stream as well. So thanks, guys, for tuning in. Today was awesome. I think we covered a lot of important information, and I hope it was educational for you guys. I try to give you guys original content. That's something I really care about. You know, everybody's out here always trying to do reactions and stuff. I try to give you guys original stuff. You know, stuff that maybe you haven't heard before. It was good to hear that a lot of you haven't heard of the ethnic cleansing of the German population. So you guys got educated on that today. Glory to God for that.